Okay, wonderful. Okay, well, good evening, everybody. My name is Scott Horsley. I'm chair of the Katuitt Water District.
Can you hear me now?
This is Tom. Great.
I can hear you, Tom. Yep.
All right. Hey, Tom. And
Operator
with
error.
me,
Sorry.
good timing, are the other water commissioners, Tom Hoppenstadt and Mark Robinson. We also have Chris Wiseman, the superintendent, and Jennifer Nash, the office manager, with us tonight. And this is a Water Commissioners public hearing meeting. We have a number of other agenda items which we'll take up later. We've decided to first put the irrigation workshop, and thank all of you for joining us. And first thing I want to say, this is the notice that was sent out, and just to clarify, we have a moratorium in place on new connections for automatic irrigation systems to the public water supply until October 20th. During that period of time, we want to study our options and look at a number of different management techniques. We've had some great conversations with some irrigation professionals in the area, and we're considering a pretty broad range of options, which we'll talk about later. But I do want to take this opportunity. I've run into a number of residents in Katuitt over the past couple of weeks, and I know that people are voluntarily going along with the moratorium. I ran into a gentleman this afternoon out for a walk, and he wanted to put one in, but he heard we had a moratorium in place, and he's respecting that. So I really want to thank him and others who are complying. As we'll get into, we've got I think some significant water demand issues and supply issues, which we'll try to explain tonight, and then again look at some options going forward. So let me start. We've got three presenters: myself, Chris Wiseman, the superintendent, and I've invited Jack Ahern to join us as well. And Jack's a landscape architecture professor, just retired from the University of Massachusetts. I've been working with him, and he's going to say a few words tonight. But let me start with this slide and just quickly explain what our mission here is, because there's a number of laws that that apply to us. For those who are not familiar, we were created in 1935, special legislation. The Wetlands Protection Act came along in the early 70s, and one of the issues we want to talk about tonight are some of the interactions between pumping of our well fields and impacts on nearby wetlands, including the Little River. We'll get into that more later. We are a public water supply under the Federal Safe Drinking Water Act, so we need to comply with ensuring that we deliver drinking water quality water, and that's a pretty stringent regulatory program that Chris does a fantastic job keeping us on top of, including a lot of regular testing. And there's also a program called wellhead protection, which means we need to evaluate all of the uses within our wellhead areas. I'm going to show you a map of what those are in a little bit. And then finally, there's a newer law, most recently updated in 2017, the Mass Water Management Act, that directs us to provide a sustainable water management program. And that, as the words say here, that includes not only delivering water, but also making sure that we're protecting the environment, including wetlands, streams, and other parts of the environment, and obviously considering economic growth. So that's a quick overview of the laws, the primary laws that govern us, and we need to keep all of that in mind. I want to start with some basic hydrology here, because I think as we discuss this, we want to all be on the same page with maybe some terminology, and one of the reasons why we're concerned with over pumping. So this is a cross section, and let me just say, Jen, can you see my cursor here?
I can.
Wonderful, thank you. So this represents a well, and we have a number of wells, but this is one well, and this blue line running across horizontally here is the water level, I should say the beginning water level, or the static water level. Underneath the ground, that's called the water table. If you were to dig a well at any point, you encounter the water table when you hit that level. And what we're seeing here is we pump this well, the water levels, or the water table, is drawn down around the well. This is called the cone of depression. This can be on the order of tens of feet, so it's pretty significant. And as you can see, when it's near a stream, which is our case, that pumping of the water levels can affect the stream, and we believe that's occurring here. Now, the other part of the picture I want to explain is the source of all of our water is what's called recharge. It's a portion of the annual precipitation. In fact, on Cape Cod, it's about half. We get around 45, 46 inches of rain per year. About half of that makes it into the groundwater. And that's really where all of our water supply comes from. And one of the points I want to get across early on here is as we pump the water and then direct it to our homes, as shown here, there are two primary uses. One is the water we use inside our house for taking showers, cooking, drinking, etc. And as I think everybody knows, that ends up in a septic system, which is represented here. And then the septic system leaches into the groundwater, and this is what we call a return flow. So most of that water that we use in our home gets back into the groundwater. And that's why I'm labeling it here as a non-consumptive use. So from a volume standpoint, that water is returned to our groundwater system. Conversely, water that's put on for irrigation, such as primary use in Katuitt is lawns, that is a consumptive use, meaning that very little, if any, of that water returns to the groundwater system. It's lost to evapotranspiration. So in the end, that type of use has a bigger impact on our surface waters than the consumptive use, which is, the non-consumptive use, which is essentially recycling the water. Okay, so let's, hopefully that'll help us with some of our discussion going forward. Now, one of the questions I've been asked since we've been talking about this is, well, isn't this fresh water just flowing to the ocean anyways? Isn't that kind of wasted? And interestingly enough, I looked on the Katuitt Oyster Company's website, and the first thing I found there is this quote, which I think is pretty interesting. So according to them, freshwater streams, marshes, estuaries combined with the clean water from the sound is what really provides the ecosystem that provides a really good habitat for things like oysters. So there is an important connection there between the fresh water discharging into our coastal waters and our habitat and the quality of that water. I've also got a map in here, a map in here showing USGS map, just for a little geography. This is Katuitt Bay down here. And up in the northwest upper left corner is Levels Pond. Out of Levels Pond comes the Little River, which you can see works its way down through here and discharges into Katuitt Bay. As we'll get into in a few minutes, some of our well fields, in fact, our main well field is in this area in close proximity to the Little River. And as from that prior picture I showed you, as those wells get pumped, some of the water comes from the river, or less water gets to the river. But the point of this slide is to suggest that, as I think most people are aware, there's a huge issue across Cape Cod with regard to water quality in the coastal waters. And as my two bullets suggest here, the two options we have to manage that are less nutrients or pollutants getting into the water, which we're working hard to do, replacing septic systems with more innovative systems that remove nitrogen, for example, reducing fertilizers, etc. The other option is to provide more fresh water or to maintain the amount of fresh water going there, because that's what essentially dilutes the pollutants and enables us to arrive at safe levels of compounds like nitrogen in the coastal waters. So we really need to manage both the amount of water and the amount of pollutants. And it's going to be a little bit tricky, but we need to keep both of those in mind. Okay, so let me get specifically to lawn irrigation. As I already mentioned, this is a consumptive use. Basically looking at our pumping data, and this is not only true here in Katuitt, but really across a lot of Massachusetts during the summer, about half of our summer pumping is lawn irrigation. The other way of saying that is during the summer, when we're irrigating lawns, it doubles our demand. That's an approximate value. So it's a pretty significant amount. It's not like 5 or 10%. It pretty much doubles our demand. So it is a very significant part of our pumping and our demand. I'm going to ask Chris to step in here for a minute, Chris Wiseman, our superintendent, just to talk a little bit about our supply and how much we pump and how close we are to our capacity. So Chris, why don't you take a couple minutes here and explain these couple of charts.
Yeah, thank you. This here is the chart that we have certain permits that we have to do with the state. We're allowed to pump out basically 640,000 gallons a day out of the aquifer. Be 19,520,000 a month. and just under 234 million a year. This is just showing in the summer with those daily flows that we have, we are well above, on some points almost double of what we're permitted to take out of those wells. It's a high demand. It does come down in the winter months. It's got to do, basically, I would say, we're well above. We've gone over, if you want to go to the next slide, Jen.
I got it.
Thanks, oh, sorry.
Yep. That's all right.
If you look here, this is just a 10-year comparative to, excuse me, this is just this year, last June that we had. There wasn't one day that we had where we were below our permitted consumption or withdrawals. As a matter of fact, I kind of looked back into the last few years, and if you go to June, July, and August, we haven't been below at all this year. I mean, above. We've been below, below it. We pumped well above. We're pumping millions of gallons a day where we should only be pumping 640,000. So this is, I know it's a dry summer. I went back and looked at last year. We only had 4 days during June, July, and August that we didn't, of last year even. In the last 10 years, June, July, August, sometimes May, and quite a few times September, we've been over also. We're going back all the way to 2009. So it shows that this time of year, I realize we have a higher population also, but it shouldn't be that much of an indicator. So we are pumping quite a bit. I don't have the chart here, but in the morning when we come in, from 4 o'clock till about 6:30, our tanks drop. They can't keep up. I have all 5 stations running. They still can't keep up with the demand that goes on every day this month, every day last month. So it's there. It's a lot being used. I don't know if there's another one there. Slide, Scott.
I think that was
I think
it,
that's
Chris.
the only two, yeah. So it's been happening for the last 10 years. We can go back 10, 11 years.
Yep.
I could go back further and tell you that it happened all the way from 2001 on. And if we lose one station, there was one day down this month where we were down to about 12, 13 feet on the tank. If we had a fire or anything, we would have been in trouble. So as long as everything's running fine, there's about 2 hours there where we can't keep up, but then everything starts coming back. So if we have problems with one of our stations, we're going to have some problems. We're going to have to do some kind of mandatory instead of voluntary that we have out there now.
Chris, thank you.
Yep.
I think the bottom line here is we're pumping close to our capacity during this time of year. And as I'll get into, there's some other issues associated with that. This is our main well field off of Sampson's Mill Road. And just for orientation with my pointer, Lovell's Pond is up here at the top again. And the little river I've identified is flowing down to the bottom right, southeast, in this direction towards Catuit Bay. You can see that these 3 wells, which is our main well field, pretty close proximity to the river and associated wetlands, which are shown here. This line here that I'm tracing is known as a wellhead protection area. Those are required to be delineated under the Safe Drinking Water Act that I referred to earlier. And that is the area that contributes to these wells. That's where the groundwater comes from. It goes into these wells while they're pumping. And you can see from this map that it includes the Little River and the wetlands. So much like that, one of those first slides I showed you, as these wells are pumping a lot in the summer, as Chris just explained, it's very likely that we're pulling water from the Little River and these wetlands. Here's a little diagram to show what we're talking about with the wellhead protection area. This is EPA, Environmental Protection Area slide, and it shows the well here with this yellow area that contributes to the well. You can again see this cone of depression, and the idea is as you pump the well, it pulls the water towards the well. So back to this diagram here, I put in some blue flow arrows. It shows the groundwater flowing from various directions within this wellhead protection area to the wells, including the Little River and these associated wetlands, okay? This is a close-up of the well field, and you can see the 3 wells. This is actually from one of our engineering consultants. And you can see that this well field here is actually within what's called a wetland buffer area. So it's very, very close to the stream and the wetlands. And here's 2 pictures that show kind of a natural condition. Here's the groundwater flowing to a stream or the Little River without pumping. And here is a picture of the pumping situation where you can see the groundwater flow is actually reversed. And the well is drawing water from the river, which is what we believe is occurring during these maximum pumping periods. Now, why is this of concern? Well, one is, as I mentioned before, we have to be cognizant of the Wetlands Protection Act, as well as the Sustainable Water Management Initiative, which essentially says we shouldn't be causing ecological damage. But there's another consideration here. Wetland soils have a lot of iron and manganese in them, and iron and manganese move in groundwater conditions where there's little oxygen, including wetland soils. So we've had a report from an engineering firm recently that's suggesting we are starting to get some iron and manganese, and some of you may have seen this. It can get into your laundry and cause some staining, etc. It's likely and probable that one of the primary sources are these wetland soils. Our engineer is telling us that we may need to build a treatment plant at some point in the future, and the estimated cost is around $10 million. So in addition to ecological problems by pumping water from the stream and the wetlands, there might be some serious economic issues too, in the tune of a $10 million treatment plant that we may have to pay for at some point because we are mobilizing manganese from these soils. So that's another consideration. And here's a picture of the Little River, just those who are, if you haven't been out to this area, this is Sampson's Mill Road, and we're looking north upstream in this left picture. And on the right, we're looking downstream, and that's Commissioner Mark Robinson there, who had the pictures taken. And you can see that the stream bed is dry. So, and I was out there earlier this week, actually, and this is if you go out there now, this is the same condition you'll see. There's no water in the stream. And again, that's because the water levels are that's 2 reasons. One is we're at a low time of the year, but secondly, the pumping of the wells is lowering the water even further and the stream going dry. So you don't really need to be an aquatic biologist to understand that this habitat is going to be problematic for whatever critters may be living there under natural conditions. So we've got some serious impacts. So let's now transition. That's kind of a quick overview of what we perceive as the issue and the problem and why we want to talk about this. And let's now transition to talking about what are our options. And I kind of just put this together, and there may be other things. And we've had a number of people call us, and we really appreciate the input and the dialogue that we've got going. I've talked to some of the major irrigation companies in the area. They're very helpful and interested. And so there's a few options. Number one is improve the efficiency of the irrigation systems, so-called smart systems, rain sensors, etc. Every indication is that this might save us somewhere between 10 and 25% of the water. It won't get us near the 50% reduction, which maybe is what what would be under more natural conditions. But there's some benefit to this, and that would be if all the irrigation systems in the village employed this technology and kept it up to date. What I've been told by the irrigation professionals is these need to be inspected at least every 3 years, every 3 to 5 years. Some parts need to be replaced to make sure that they're working properly. So that is an option that we're exploring, but we got to figure out a way to perhaps enforce that, or to get inspections done so we know that that's occurring. Again, I'm not sure that it solves all the issues that I've laid out, but it might get us part way there. The second option, and I'm going to ask Jack Ahern to talk in a minute here, is alternative landscaping. Maybe we don't need all of the lawns that we all have, or maybe we don't need to irrigate them as much as we'd like to. And I understand that's a personal choice, but I think it's something to at least think about. Then the third option is something that we're already encouraging, and that is consider putting in your own well on site and providing water supply from that. Because most of the wells will not be in close proximity to the stream or wetlands. so we won't have those issues. We spread out the impact to various areas, and that's a much better situation. We've got some cost estimates we can talk about later if we want to during the question and answer period on that. It looks like it might be something like 5 to 6 year payback period, people who would install those, but that is an option, okay? And we'll come back and talk about that. So very briefly on these so-called smart systems, again, there are some rain sensors and controllers that can be installed. As I said, they need to be inspected. We might get something on the order of 33% reduction on those properties, or an overall reduction savings of about 16% of this peak pumping that Chris was talking about earlier. So there might be some benefit there. May or may not get us all the way to where we need to go. And then I want to move into and ask Jack Ahern again to talk a little bit alternative landscaping. Jack, you can correct me, but I believe you're in the process of writing a book on the subject. You're a noted authority. You've done a lot of great work for the Barnstable Clean Water Coalition. So with further ado, let me just go to your first slide and have you say a few words. Jack?
Thank you. Is my audio on?
It is. We can hear you. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. This is the name of the book that I'm writing. It's advocating for using native plants in landscapes for Cape and the islands for a number of reasons, including reducing irrigation needs. Next, please. I'm trying to get people's attention. Many people believe there is a crisis in water quality. We have had recent algae blooms. 80% of Cape Cod's estuaries are impaired, some of them seriously impaired, including the Three Bays watershed that is in Kituit. More recently, the APCC sampled a number of ponds across the Cape and found that 39% had unacceptable water quality. And 80% of this problem is from septic systems, according to the EPA. The other 18% is from nitrate pollution from agriculture, landscape, and stormwater. And ecologically designed landscapes can be a part of a solution to the water quality crisis. Next, please. So lawns, I could talk all night about lawns, but I won't. And I won't read all of this text, but we have, our culture has come to have a habit of lawns without even thinking about it. Lawns are planted because we think we're expected to do it. And many of the lawns that are planted are not used except when people mow them or irrigate them. And the sandy soils that we have on the Cape, throughout the Cape, allow the water and a portion of the fertilizers and pesticides used to leach into the groundwater and reach the water table, as Scott mentioned. So, you know, there's some questions about the relative wisdom of using lawns in such a widespread way. Next. So lawn best management practices. You know, this is starting from the premise that yes, lawns have their place in the landscape, and everybody loves and wants to have some lawn. But we could first reduce the amount of lawn, especially along buffers from any water or wetlands, to have a buffer zone. Secondly, to follow some best practices. These come from UMass Center for Agriculture. Test the soil. Reduce fertilizer use. The Cape has fertilizer regulations. Simple things like mowing. If lawns are mowed at 2 to 3 inches instead of a lower height, which most lawns are mowed at, they use less water and can withstand more drought. Irrigation is often improperly done, even without smart irrigation systems. Over irrigation is a common problem anecdotally. I don't have data on this, but from going around in the morning and seeing all of the lawns that still have sprinklers on, many of them are on every day. Weed management can be done in a kind of a reduced pesticide way, by spot treating or by pulling. And then using the appropriate mixture of turf grasses, Cape and Islands friendly turf grasses, which is a mixture of fine and tall fescues and rye, which can survive drought and can look a lot better with no irrigation. And finally, to replace part of the lawn with a lawn alternative. Next. So the turf irrigation, UMass recommends 1 inch of irrigation a week if there's no rain. And they recommend doing that once a week, which promotes a deeper root growth. The 1 inch of rain applied by an irrigation system will penetrate into the water, and it will encourage the grass roots to grow deeper. They'll still get to the water, but then when there is no water, they'll become more tolerant of drought. So if you use 1 inch of irrigation a week, that's a big if people use that, and maybe this is something you would consider in your recommendations or regulations, you can end up with, close to 40,000 gallons per season for a small lawn of 5,000 square feet. When you get to 10,000 square feet, you can end up with 75,000 gallons per irrigation season of 12 weeks. And again, that's assuming 1 inch of rain, 1 inch of irrigation per week. So if that is exceeded, of course, the number goes up. Next. So here are some of the alternatives that can be used instead of conventional lawns. The no-mow fescue lawn is a recently developed mix of fescue grasses that grow very slowly and do really well without irrigation. They look a little shaggy like this. They can be cut 2 or 3 times a year if a more neat look is desired. A released lawn, most lawns, if you stop mowing them, will have a meadow, will have a number of wildflowers that look like this, with black-eyed Susans and Queen Anne's lace and some other wildflowers. Another alternative, certainly for close to coastal areas, is American beach grass, which obviously thrives with no irrigation and does really well in drought. Next. A few other alternatives. Purple love grass is it's the grass that you see growing along the highways right now that's in flower. It has a, excuse me, a purple hazy-like flower. Quite attractive. Not exactly a lawn to walk on, but a nice alternative for places that you don't need to walk on. A wild strawberry lawn. This is at the Garden in the Woods in Framingham. This is an alternative that will take foot traffic and requires no irrigation. Pennsylvania sedge is not a grass, but is a sedge. It's another species that can do well in more shady areas without irrigation. Next. The top left slide, something happened to my text. That's bearberry. That is a native evergreen shrub that stays very low to the ground and makes a beautiful ground cover. It grows on the sand dunes right next to the ocean with no irrigation. For a little taller ground cover, black huckleberry or low bush blueberry also can provide a beautiful alternative to lawns in places where you don't need the lawn. It's obviously not a place to practice your putting or throw frisbees, but it provides a good ground cover and also provides food for native wildlife. Next. And finally, hay-scented fern is one of our native ferns that grows very vigorously and can spread. Moss lawns are beautiful alternatives that obviously require no mowing. They do require a little bit of maintenance, especially to get established, but once they're established, they do very well with no irrigation. They can go dormant and turn a little brown in the summer, but they will return to a green color as soon as the cooler temperature and moisture returns in September. And finally, the sandplain grasslands, which are one of our very special native plant communities of native grasslands, including little blue stem, give a lot of the Cape and the Islands their character. And these are species also that are totally adapted to dry, sandy soils and hot sun. I think, yeah, that's my last slide. So thank you.
Jack, thank you very much. Just some ideas for people to think about who might be interested in reducing lawn areas. And so we can come back to some of this. I just got 2 or 3 more slides. I'll wrap up here. And then we really want to hear from you. This is a workshop. We want to hear your ideas and thoughts. Just one slide kind of going along with Jack's talking about this people could do on site. If you put your own irrigation well in, it might provide a double benefit. Jack was talking about some of the water quality issues we have in our bay. So if you put your irrigation well in the right place, it may not only provide water to your lawn, but you may recapture some of this nitrogen that we're all very concerned about that's getting to the bay. So this is actually one of the concepts developed by the Cape Cod Commission as part of the 208 plan. So that might be an option for some people. I know I've already talked to a few people who have been interested in this. We have some guidance on this and a primer on our website, Jen, I believe. People can go look at it for more information on the concept of a so-called fertigation well. And then lastly, I just want to make it clear that we are considering some regulations. That's one of the options here. And we would not be the first town or water district to do this. There are many others, several on the Cape. We've actually had some very good discussions with the Mashpee Water District, who's had a fairly successful program implementing irrigation regulations, and of course Falmouth and some other communities. So we're talking with them. We're trying to learn from their experience. And again, we want to, I think that's my last slide. I will I want to open it up to Q&A here in a second, but I do want to thank everybody, people that have already talked to us, already called in. We've had some great conversations, people that I've run into. I will just go back to this slide because we did have one person write in who could not make the meeting. So I'll just quickly read this kind of into the record. This is from the Hendersons, and they were unable to attend the meeting tonight. They applaud our moratorium. I'm just paraphrasing here, and they do support some sort of restriction. They actually use the term ban here. So I know there's different opinions here. We've had a number of people call us sort of on both sides of the fence. We do have a problem. I think that's pretty clear, and we need to make some adjustments going forward. And so at this point, I do want to open it up for questions, and please, I guess, Jen, maybe I'll let you recognize people. Just is a place you can raise your hand. If you find that, where is that? No, there's an actual for raising their hand right there. So I'll let Jen call on people here, and we'll try to answer some questions now. If we can't answer all of them, we will get back to you. And again, thank you. So let's proceed with questions and comments.
Jack, go ahead. Thank you.
Yes, good evening, and thank you for this presentation. I guess my first question is, will this presentation be posted on your website or somewhere available? It would have been helpful to be able to go through this at least quickly before this meeting, and but that would be very helpful if you do that. Secondly, you've covered a lot of area, and I think that the presentation on just the understanding of how an aquifer works and how it draws from the well, I think that's important for people to understand. You know, it's not just a pond down there that you're drawing from, like, you know, an oil field. And, you know, just in full disclosure, I spent 13 years on the as a water commissioner in Katuitt. I was involved heavily in expanding the system, fighting the MTBE. We did a lot of groundwater mapping work during that. And it just reminds me to go back. Some of those files should be at the department out there, and it could be helpful in this manner. But having said that, I was a recipient of the flyer. I have it right here. And the predicate of the flyer is based upon, you know, plausibility, assumption that somehow, and I would imagine your belief is only within the zones of contribution to the well, because the well can impact outside that it is somehow drawing from surface water bodies. And I don't know if that's a fact or not. I know that we're all seeing lack of water in some cases anecdotally. We know we haven't had rain, and there's other surfaces that supply. So there's a number of reasons for conservation of water, et cetera, but I'm not sure the predicate is correct. And we should understand that before making new regulations and based on that assumption. In terms of, I'd like to look at some of the other issues that you raised, but that's going to take some time on volume and permits. I know there's limitations, but you know, whether or not a new well is needed or not. It's been a while since I've really studied our aquifer, but it's very unique, and the state recognizes that too. Water moves very quickly through the aquifer, and it has very little impact by industrial commercial uses, as you guys well know. So I'll leave it at that, I'd like to focus on the primary assumption, conservation being another issue. Thank you.
Thank you. And I can tell you a quick response. We are posting this on the website, the video recording of this. So certainly people can go back and look at it, or you can have other people do that as well. And we will be, the other thing I should mention is we're not making any decisions tonight. This is really just informational. So those that are interested and have good questions like you've raised, there will be other hearings coming up this fall, or excuse me, other meetings, public meetings where we would invite more detailed discussion. So thank you for all of those. Are all really good comments, and we'll certainly look forward to more dialogue. I don't know, maybe we should take some more questions and comments, but before I get into detailed responses to those, because you've raised a number of good questions and comments. So maybe I'll leave it at that for now.
We have another question from John. Okay to go ahead, John.
Hi, it's Lee, John's wife. So we really appreciated this presentation. We found it extremely informative and gave us a lot of information that we didn't have before. But I'm curious about the comment that why lawn irrigation doesn't go back to the aquifer.
Sure, I think I can answer that quickly. Well, because it's intended, it goes to the plants and it gets returned to the atmosphere as evapotranspiration. We do have one of the world's experts here. So Jack, do you want to explain that in a little more detail? Jack Ahern? Consumptive use of water? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it really depends on how much irrigation is put down. I'm not an irrigation expert, but when there's over irrigation, I believe there would be some fraction of the water would go back to the aquifer. Certainly, if it's done properly, the whole intention is to only give enough water to keep the turf healthy. So the goal of irrigation is to use just enough water so that none of it will leach back into the aquifer. So it depends on how much is applied. And I believe it's very feasible that with a heavy irrigation application, there could be some leaching back into the aquifer.
Thank you very much. That makes sense.
Other questions?
We've got one more from Vic Mastro. Go ahead, Vic.
Yeah, I appreciate all the work that the water commissioners have done over the last year, I guess, or two, discussing, the issues here. And I do have a couple of comments. I'm past water commissioner, and water has always concerned me, and, the vegetation that supports that. And of course, our biggest well area is covered mostly by trees, which transpire a lot of water and use a lot of water. But my main concerns are that, one, that we take a comprehensive look at encouraging multiple private wells pumping out of the aquifer. And we have several bodies of water in the town, streams and ponds, that could be impacted. And we know of one that's been heavily impacted, the Santuit River. both in terms of drawdown and in terms of nitrogen loading. The other issue here, well, I'd like to see a comprehensive study of how our wells and any projected number of private wells would impact that aquifer and impact the surface water. But the other issue I think that we have to look at is by encouraging a lot of private wells for irrigation, the revenues for the town water district will decrease. And some of the heavy users now for irrigation contribute a large percentage of those revenues. So I think in this whole effort, we need to find out how those revenues would impact us in terms of drinking water and fire protection water, which is another use for our water, and whether we're right-sized in terms of infrastructure and personnel, or we're too heavy, or we're too light. Anyway, I think it's an issue that covers the whole water district and indeed our adjacent neighbors. Mashpee certainly has an impact on the Santuit River and its flow. So I'd like to see the direction of this go in doing a comprehensive study of what the impacts of our current usage and encouraging private wells sinking into the aquifer and, doing their pumping by themselves. Anyway, that's my issues, and I think I sent a email to all the water commissioners addressing those, and perhaps a little bit more detailed than I just presented. But that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful.
We have another raised hand from Roger Anderson.
Hi. First of all, I'd like to communicate to the commissioners that I feel blindsided. In July, I spent about 5 minutes talking to the commissioners during the public comment section relative to support for irrigation systems. At that time, I was told that this meeting, we were going to invite the superintendent from the Mashpee Water District. Is somebody else talking?
I've muted him, Mr. Anderson. Thank you.
Oh, okay, thank you. I was told that we were going to have the superintendent from the Mashpee Water District here, and I prepared a number of questions and comments relative to that. This presentation has nothing to do with that. And again, I feel blindsided. I would like to point out that the data that I've been given from the district states that we have not dug a well for over 22 years. Optimum way to solve this problem is probably a combination of regulation and additional supply. And I see no effort to increase the supply for this district. I would like to understand, and not go into the detail now, but Commissioner Horsley said half of our pumpage during the summer is in irrigation systems. I would like to see the data he used to come to that conclusion, because I have asked and there is no data saying that. Now, is he accurate? I don't know, but there's a lot of things we don't know before we start making regulations, and we should know. So finally, this consumptive use, I think that your author, I believe his name was Jack, answered the question. If you're irrigating your lawn properly, there isn't consumptive use. And all I can say is that many of us have been irrigating our lawns. We are not up in the upper half of the users from the water district. And I think we're using our systems responsibly. There may be some people that have too large of a system for this district, and I support getting them off of the system 100%. I'm not going to go any further than that because of the number of participants that we have, but just know that again, I feel very blindsided by this presentation, and I think it should have been communicated to me, and I wouldn't have spent so much time preparing for the superintendent of the Mashpee Water District. Thank you.
Mr. Anderson, thank you. I'll just, a couple quick responses. We did invite, as I think you may know, because I spoke to you on the phone, I did have a conversation with the Mashpee Water District, and they shared a lot of good information. We did invite them. They were unable to attend. And I'm sorry we didn't inform you of that because I was unaware that that was going to be your focus tonight, but we can certainly follow up with you with whatever information you need there. And I do want to clarify this consumptive use issue again. And I'm happy to have Jack join me on this, but I think what Jack was saying is if you add more water than necessary, there would be some return flows to the aquifer. If you irrigate exactly the amount of water required by the lawn, then that is 100% consumptive. So I do want to clarify that. There's no question that it is a consumptive use, as is irrigation of agriculture, and it becomes 100% consumptive if in fact you apply it carefully and target it to the plants because they use all the water. The only time there's a return flow is if you over irrigate or you irrigate when it's raining, which we do see some of too. So proper irrigation is 100% consumptive, and we can clarify that. And I do have some figures I can get back to you later with where I derive my estimates of 50%. I'm happy to share that. There's some statewide estimates on that by the Massachusetts Water Commission, but Mr. Anderson, we've had a number of dialogues, and I'll continue to provide, we will continue to provide you any information you want. You've had some great input. Again, I'm sorry about your disappointment about the Water District not being here from Mashpee tonight. But in any case, let's move on, Jen, with other questions.
One quick question, if I may, Commissioner Horsley.
Sure. Yes, sir.
If I understand, well, I don't pretend to understand it properly, but then trees are consumptive users of water.
Well, if you irrigate them, yes. But if natural precipitation, they are taking up some evapotranspiration. But what we're talking about tonight is when you're applying pumped water as irrigation, whether it's consumptive or not. So if you irrigate non-lawn areas such as trees and shrubs, you're absolutely right. That would be consumptive as well.
Okay, thank you.
Looks like we have one more from Jackie.
Hi, yeah, Jackie Barton. For any of you who know me, my front lawn is moss, my backyard is trees. I don't irrigate because I don't have time to mow and I don't want to pay somebody to do it. But it's as simple as that. I applaud the Cotuit Water Commissioners for bringing this issue up. I do think that it's an issue that has been out there and not discussed for a long time. Historical study will suggest that both the Little River and the Marston's Mills River used to be, and the Santuit River used to be active herring runs. For them to be active herring runs, there would have to be a lot more water in those streams. I believe back in 1982, the state adopted a law that says you can't put a new well in if it affects a surface water body. And Scott, you would know more about that. And so I gotta say, for me, it was probably about 20 years ago when I realized that when they put, for instance, the Hayden well field in Marston's Mills, that probably seriously affected what we call the duck pond, the mill pond there. And so over time, we've seen our surface water resources lose water. We see it on Eagle Pond as well. And I think that whatever we can do to reduce the consumption from those wells, which are basically pumping the aquifer dry, pumping the streams dry, pumping the ponds dry, is critical to the long-term health of our community. So as I understand it, what you're putting forward is a proposal that would affect new irrigation systems, not the existing ones, but we still have to deal with those in some fashion. And so I would encourage the water commissioners to continue in this direction, because the cost of building a new well, or the cost of um, treating for iron and manganese is far more costly than instituting a regulation that says we can't continue to do more of the same. We know that what we've been doing isn't good, and so what can we do to stop the continuance of that? If we can roll it back, that's great. But what I see is basically we're saying this practice must stop as new construction, and that seems to me pretty simple. So I applaud your efforts and encourage you to move forward. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there other comments or questions? No other questions?
I'm not seeing any, Scott.
Okay.
Oh,
well,
wait,
okay.
one more from Steve Mojo.
I have a question too, Don Schwinn, when you get a chance.
Oh, thank you. Steve, are you there?
Okay, thank you. Scott, I found the discussion interesting. I was questioning, could you say more about the cost of fertigation wells? And would you consider putting grants available to local residents who wish to install them to help mitigate the water usage through the system?
Sure, I can say a couple words about fertigation. And again, want to direct you to the website where we've actually got a written document with some diagrams. It might be more detailed than what I can do in a couple minutes right now. But as I mentioned before, the concept is really, it's just an irrigation well that's placed in an area where there's already nitrogen in the groundwater, which frankly is a lot of areas in Katuitt because we have a lot of septic systems. So the concept is really to try to provide water locally, but also recover and recycle some of these nutrients. I might add that some of you may be familiar with the Pine Hills development up in Plymouth. They actually installed some fertigation wells for the golf course where they're recovering groundwater that's downstream of their wastewater system. They're pumping that water onto the golf course, and they're actually saving money on commercial fertilizers because they're using the exact same thing they're trying to buy, that's nitrogen and phosphorus, which is in the groundwater. So that's the concept. And again, it was something developed by the Cape Cod Commission 208 plan as both a irrigation source, but also as a way to do some double duty and recapture some of this nitrogen that is getting into the bay, which we're all going to pay a lot of money for to try to mitigate at some point in the future. I think people have heard the figure of over $1 billion for sewering, which is one alternative. We can sewer Katuitt and spend that money. That's one option. There are less expensive options, and this might be one of them. So that's really where that comes from. Again, I refer you to the website, and I'd be happy to speak with you one-on-one if you'd like to on more details. This is, I think, an interesting practice that we could, in terms of cost, we did get some estimates for putting in irrigation wells on an on-lot basis, and the range I think was somewhere between $4,000 and $6,000. Jen provided some information on what estimates of annual costs of the irrigation water that we're paying for the new rates, and it looks like it's a 5 to 6 or 7 year payback period as an investment if you put in a well, so that there is that consideration. The cost gets recovered over a period of time by not paying the water rates. So that's the information that we have, and we'd be happy to share more going forward with people that are interested in that option.
Mr. Schwinn?
I think he's on mute. Mr. Shreen, I don't think we can hear you, can we?
Let's see if
Yep.
there you go.
We got you
I
now.
have to unmute, sorry about that.
No
My
problem.
question was, how long ago was this 19.5 million gallon per month limit generated? Is it a fresh figure or is it something that's been around for years and years and years?
Chris, do you know the answer to that? Or maybe one of the other water commissioners that were here before me?
Are you, excuse me, I'm sorry, is he asking how long the current withdrawal permits
I think so,
has
yeah.
been there? It's been, I believe, in effect for at least 20-something years. We're in the midst right now, excuse me, we've been trying to renew it. We're in an interim basis right now. They are offering a very slight increase, but it's not much at all. Most people on the Cape, they have decreased their water withdrawal permits. We're one of the few places, because of our past water, they have increased it. And I don't think it's any more than like 5 million or something like that. We still would be on the cusp with what we have now.
So it's basically a pretty old number.
Correct.
Also, you're looking at the chart that I think was Chris presented earlier with that number drawn across it. It looks like we'd have to just not irrigate at all anywhere in town to keep the number under that limit for the summer. Do I understand that correctly?
I don't think at this point, as you know, we've just increased the rates. This should be a good indicator of people using less water, people putting in, you're using the irrigation less. The problem is right now is that we've had a drought year and a lot of people are still trying to keep their lawns green. Some people are giving up. I wished I could give you a more accurate answer on that. I kind of thought at this time of year, we might be able to see quite an indication where a lot of people wouldn't be using at this point. So accurately, I don't think that we would be over, but I don't have that data. I'd have to try to figure out a way to get it.
Okay. Another comment is based on the age of the 19.5 million gallon a month figure, and seemingly I'm guessing that we really haven't had a total town-wide look at our wells and withdrawal amounts and so forth in quite some time. I would echo whoever it was that recommended that we take a look at the overall situation while we're in the process of looking at the irrigation load on the water system. I think it sounds like we need to have some more information on a broader basis to make some good decisions. On a lesser note, it was about 2 months ago when we asked, after 25 years of living here, my wife and I are in our 80s, we got tired of lugging hoses around for sprinklers and drip systems and so forth. We asked for a quote on an underground system, and guess what? The moratorium came along. So I guess our only alternative is to keep watering with our inefficient tripod-mounted spray guns instead of the modern rotary nozzles, and keep using our 6 timers on faucets to run these things. On the amount of acreage we have, our lot is 60,000 acres. We irrigate 60,000 square feet. Not the whole Cape. And so we have a very small property. We'd like to put in an automatic system because we're too old to lug these things around, and trying to get a contractor to do it in the summer is almost impossible. So I don't know how you're going to handle that. We look around at neighbors who have large irrigation systems up and down Old Post Road and Katuitt Bay Shores and Better Homes and Gardens looking places. We don't water much at all. Most 90% of our lot is is brown, but we'd like to have a couple of small green patches around the house just to make it look decent. So I don't know what alternative it sounds like we have to put in an automatic system, because you guys are prohibiting it. Also, because we have such a small area to water, putting in a $4,000 or $6,000 well to water 1,000 or 2 square feet doesn't make a lot of sense either. So I'm just trying to present that scenario as something that maybe you could consider in your overall decisions on how to deal with this problem. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think those are really good comments. We have had a discussion about trying to maintain some ability to do that for smaller lawns. And as other people, Mr. Anderson had some really good ideas about trying to focus on some of the larger users first. So we have those comments. We've actually been talking about that, and we want to be mindful of situations like yours as well. So
by the way,
yes,
we have been cultivating bearberry for the entire 20 years we've been here, and our patch of bearberry has just about doubled, but it's still only a couple thousand square feet, and we have to constantly threaten the guy who mows our lawn to raise his blade so he doesn't kill them all. But bearberry is a great alternative to a lawn. It just takes a long time for it to grow.
Yeah. Well, let me say that we've had some really good comments and suggestions, and we have some homework to do here. We're not able to respond to all of your questions right now, but we will. And we've taken some notes. And if any of you want us to email us with some more specific as follow-up questions, we will get back to you. We're a small crew here, and a lot of it goes to Jen. We appreciate her incredible work as the office manager, but we will get back to you if you give us a little bit of time, and we will be advertising future meetings. We meet monthly, and this will remain on our agenda through the fall as we look at options to deal with this issue. So
Scott, I
again,
have,
yep.
sorry, one more question from
Okay,
Jack
great.
Thomas, if you have a sec.
Sure, absolutely. Jack, sure, go ahead.
Jack, are you there?
Boy, yes.
Thanks.
Thank you again. It's not really a question. It goes back to your fundamental premise. And a lot of great comments tonight and options to do different things to conserve water. I'm all for it. But we really need to understand what our wells are doing to surface waters, if they are or if they aren't. And the second thing on that note is one of the studies, when we were looking at it, and this is why I'm saying general models, even state models, don't always apply to the local area. And what's happening up gradient from us is another story in terms of the surface. But our aquifer may be so rich that it can withstand another well and satisfy the needs of the village, the district, and all the other names it has, and work in conjunction with some of these other aspects of independent wells outside the zone of contribution. But when we're looking at what our wells, public wells, are doing to anything, it has to be within the zone of contribution.
Yes.
I'll leave it at that tonight.
No, that's great comments, and I did make the note earlier. I think we do need to do some more modeling or homework and verify. There are some USGS models, you may be aware, that do show drawdowns along Little River, along the Marston's Mills River. They suggest that there is induced infiltration in those areas. We've done some observations and flow measurements to suggest that's happening, but I think you're absolutely right. If we're going to, we probably need to drill down on that. We certainly can do some more work that way to confirm these kind of situations, and so we will discuss that, Jack, and really.
I appreciate it. Any way I can help, I'd like to participate.
Well, let's engage you in that. We appreciate that, and we'll be in touch for sure. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, why don't we wrap up this portion? Like I say, we're not making any decisions tonight. This is informational. We are going to continue with our meeting, and people are welcome to stay tuned. We've got a few other items on the agenda tonight, including, in fact, before we get too far, one of the next agenda item is any other public comments. We usually do this at the beginning of the meeting, but while we have people connected here, I'll just quickly ask, is there anybody that would like to make a public comment on other issues unrelated to this irrigation issue tonight before you leave? You're welcome to do that now, and then we're going to move on to a couple of other items. And again, that's all public and totally transparent. We're running this very openly, everything. So let me ask if there are any comments on any other issues that might apply to the water district now. Any hands, Jen?
Not seeing any.
Okay,
the
great.
moment.
Then thank you again. What's next on the agenda, Jen?
So next on the agenda is our old business, which is the lien warrant for this year.
Okay.
So I have emailed that to the commissioners earlier today. We have gotten our list down from, I think we started somewhere around over 40 accounts. We're down to 12 accounts that are more than 365 days past due, with a total past due amount of just over $2,000.
Okay. And what is there a recommendation how we move forward on this? Maybe Commissioner Robinson, you've dealt with this in most recent times. What should we be considering here as options?
So at this point, the warrant it's been finalized and it gets submitted to the town. It does require an in-person signature from all three commissioners. Then it becomes a lien against the property.
Scott, I think this represents a great work by Jen to pare that list down. I'm sure with the increase in rates, it probably was a bigger list. It was a bigger list than usual, I think. And so to have this limited amount, I think really represents a good indication of her work, person by person, working with them to figure out payment plans and whatnot. So these are people, I recognize some of them of being repeat offenders, so to speak. And it's obviously some people just don't have the funds at different times, but this is the only way that we have to ensure compliance with the payments through the lien process. So I would recommend and move that the lien list be approved and that the commissioners support it and sign it.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, Jen, we'll give you the signatures as needed as soon as we
Do
can.
those have to be in person? I apologize. Jen, do you have to have that personally signed? Is that something we'll have to have people stop by to do?
Yes, I have to have original signatures to send to the town.
Okay, so all the commissioners will stop by in the next day or so to sign off on that. Is that okay?
Thank you.
Next agenda item, Jen?
Next agenda item is a leak adjustment request that was also in the packet that I emailed you today. So this leak adjustment request is a little bit unusual in that normally these are one-time leak adjustment requests, and this particular resident had a leak not long ago. It's an older service. Had a leak not long ago, although the leak is not with the service, it was in the house. So she has already received a leak adjustment in the past. So that is the unusual circumstance. I included her letter in there. She also did send me a 24-page report from her insurance company so that we could verify that she was not compensated for the cost of the lost water. And that there was a repair project already happening at the property when this freeze up happened with the boiler, and they did address that immediately. In doing some quick calculation based on our policy, which says that the resident is responsible for double the highest usage at the traditional rates, and then we would apply the leak adjustment, she would only be eligible for a leak adjustment on 18,000 gallons out of 142,000 gallons used. which would equate to relief of $168.30 if it were to be approved.
Okay, do I have any motion by one of the commissioners on this or any questions?
I'm just looking at the letter right now, Scott, from the requester. So,
Last page, Tom drills down on the recommendation of Jen, or at least the analysis.
yeah. Did you say, Jen, that she, the name looks familiar, so she's looked for leak adjustment in prior years?
2017.
What happened then?
That's a very good question.
I believe they had a freeze up.
I think they did.
They had a freeze
Yeah.
up as well. And they had a freeze
Yeah,
again.
I believe that they had a problem with a freeze up, or they have a they've
I
had two
recall it was
different leaks there.
something with the radiators in the bathroom. That's what I
I
read.
believe so, yeah,
Yeah.
because the time before they had one and they didn't, they had a leak running between the houses. They have a cottage behind them.
Oh, yeah.
We informed them of a leak,
Yeah.
and they ended up shutting it down. They didn't ask for a leak adjustment back then. I think that's the one you see in here that was like back in 2000. Oh, actually, it would be
I
here.
was on the board then, I do remember that.
Yeah. 2000, yeah, back in 2009, they had a large usage too from that. Usually they don't have a large usage. I do believe this was something to do with the radiator heat blew in the front bathroom with some kind of heat problem. Now they have a brand new boiler, by the way.
Yeah.
Because when we went down there to check it to see if there was a leak, and everything's brand new down there.
Well, let's hope she doesn't let it freeze up again. Shut it down. I mean, do they have a means to drain their house? See,
Yes.
Basic is their plumber. Did they figure out a system that they can use to effectively and efficiently drain their house when they leave?
I believe that in the past, they've had a cottage in the back and their daughter used to live here, and it was fed from the front house. So they had to leave the water on and just try to drain the front house and winterize it. I think what they did is left the heat on because they would come visit her a few times a year and stay in the front house.
Hmm.
I actually lived in that cottage behind the house for about 5 years when I was first out of high school. So I know, I'm familiar with the property.
Yeah. Okay.
So just to recap, on the last page there, if we apply our formula, we would only abate $168.30 and should be responsible for the other $874. Is that correct?
Yes.
Have we had a situation like this before, Jen, in recent history that may provide some precedent or guidance on this?
The only person I've had request a leak adjustment twice was because the water loss fell over 2 water usage years. So they experienced a leak in late September, early October. So part of their leak was in one excess use period and part of their leak was in another. So we did grant relief in 2 different billing periods then, but in my tenure with the water department, no, I've not had a double request.
Okay.
I can say there was one before, Jen, that was granted also for a property, kind of the same situation, that had an outhouse, kind of an outbuilding that they had water to, same thing. And they had to freeze up twice there and they got granted both times. That was by a previous commission.
Is there a motion?
I guess I'd like to have something from the property owner and the plumber that did the work, stating that they have developed an efficient system that they can drain the house when they leave in the winter.
Okay.
I'd like more information from them. I just don't, this is 3 years removed.
Yeah.
2 freeze ups, it seems like maybe they're not doing their due diligence. And if they have done that, then I'm fine with moving forward and giving them the reduction. But if they haven't done that and they can't show us that, then I don't think we should.
Jen, are you comfortable getting back and asking him for that documentation?
Absolutely. Yep.
All right. Do we need I guess, is there a second on that motion?
Second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All right. We'll get back to the property owner and see if we can get some documentation on that. Good suggestion. Next item, Jen.
Next item.
Don't forget me, Jen.
That's you, Chris, vehicle acquisition.
Well, I was thinking about the report that I was going to read before.
Oh, your superintendent's report?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
we
was
didn't have
supposed to
that on
come
the
in-
agenda.
Yeah, it's on there. It was above you, though, before you got to speak.
I guess you know who's more important.
I guess, huh? Wow. How about if I start with the superintendent's report? It's pretty quick.
Okay.
I just want to give our report read on August 26th for the July pumpage of 2019 was $37,593,000. In 2020, $46,580,000 for an increase of $8,987,000. So that's what I was saying earlier. We had 12 last month. We're 9 just about this month over. We're already today. I did some quick math. We're already over what we did last August. We're really going to pumping away right now with this dry spell. That's what I'm putting it at too. It's got to be that because the pumps are running like crazy. We had no new or replacement services done in July and no leaks. So that showed themselves. So we can't blame it on that. A quick security update. We're getting real close. We got some stuff done. We have our reports finished that we had talked about last month. We're starting to get those. We had ordered some spare parts that we kind of noticed that we didn't have anything on the shelf just in case we wanted to get a bunch of spare parts. So we just ordered and just received this week the last of those. So things are really moving along. We're hoping to button this up within the next couple months. It's tough because they're supposed to do a site visit, and with everything with COVID going on, they're really not leaving and driving and staying anywhere. They're coming from New York to do it. So it's kind of holding things up there a little bit, but we're hoping pretty soon we can get them down here at least to check on everything. I have scheduled the Santuit tank to be cleaned inside. I'm going to have to drain that. I think it's September 16th. I'm not positive, but I believe it's September 16th. They'll be coming in and draining it and cleaning that out. As you guys saw, everything looks great on the outside. It's the same company that's going to come in, do an inspection on it and clean it out, do a power wash of the inside to make sure all iron and manganese washed out any kind of sediment and everything. A little update on 441 Main. I'm not positive how far we got last month, but I've had some phone calls out there, and the last wire that has to be removed, which we thought was telephone, ends up that it has to do something with cable. So talking with a couple of the people that were there when we did our tearing down, he's made a couple phone calls in. The guy knows what he has to do. He just hasn't been able to come over there and disconnect the wires. They're, I want to say a fiber wire of some type through the cable vision. So they have to be removed. Verizon refused to remove them. So we have to wait till those are down before we can even get prices to remove the poles and the rest of the stuff out of there. But it's still going. It's a tough process, but it is. Lastly on this list, I believe it's next Tuesday, the stuff for the PFAS sampling came in the mail about 2 weeks ago, actually. I received a cooler from a company that just came without any instructions. Basically, they sent me a movie to watch and told me to go out and take the test on my own. So I've requested the help, and I waited for a little bit. I have the guy coming over who did the testing over in Barnstable, guy by the name of Ron Tivy, who's the assistant over there. And he's going to come over, and we're all going to wear our shorts and our flip-flops and wear our nitrile gloves and go out and test for the PFAS. I believe it's going to be September 2nd is the day that he'll be here. We've scheduled it for the morning.
Chris, did this cooler come from Mass DEP? Are they the ones that shipped it?
No, it's a private firm out of Connecticut that it came from
Okay.
that I've never heard of.
Huh.
But it's somebody that they contracted out to.
I see.
And they've just sent it with a seal on it.
Hmm.
And I had to cut it and open it up. And they said, okay, follow these instructions. I'm afraid to open them without my gloves and everything
Yeah,
else. So
yeah.
I'm waiting till Ron comes over. We'll go over everything and see what we have to do. Watch the video again a couple times before that, and we'll go from there.
Well, it's
So
good that
that's-
we're getting the testing done finally.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
this goes against everything I've heard, which is that the protocol for this testing is all hazmat suits and, visors.
That's what I thought.
Exactly. And I thought that they were coming down to do the testing. That's because they said, we'll pay for it. We'll do the testing. Everybody told me that. Then all of a sudden I get a phone call that, here's your thing. Take it yourself. We'll pay for it.
Well, maybe you should contact DEP and find out exactly what's going on here, because it does sound a little strange.
Yeah, I talked to the gentleman. I actually called him. He says, "Oh no, you're going to take them." He says, "We're just paying for the stuff to be done."
Yeah.
He
Tom,
says, "Watch this video so you know how to do it."
Tom,
And he sent me the.
sorry.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I agree. It's a little unconventional, to say the least. I assume there are water bottles, there are sample bottles in there, in that?
Yes.
Okay. So,
Yeah, and I have to get ice to put in there. The fire department has an ice machine. We'll have to load that up. We'll have to tape the whole package up and get it FedExed overnight to the lab.
yeah, to the lab. Do the best you can, right?
Yeah,
know.
change,
I'm glad you got the guy from Barnstable who has some experience.
Exactly. Yeah.
chain of custody forms in there?
Yep.
Chris, okay. Yeah, it does sound strange. And I might just verify things with DEP before,
Okay.
because we've been waiting for this for a long time. So let's get it done right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I was kind of surprised when it came just as a cooler with closed up with a label taped to the top of the handle.
Yeah.
I was like, what is this? So yeah, it's been a long calling around asking if anybody else had done it this way, and there was somebody from Barnstable just said, "Hey, I'll send Ron over there. He's done it. He had to do it for us."
Good.
well, I think that's a
Yeah.
great idea, Chris, to pull somebody in who's gone through the process. But I agree with both commissioners that this is a little strange. So let's be careful and double check and get it done right.
Correct. Okay.
Okay. Any questions for Chris's report? Any other questions?
Well, I just want to point out that the numbers, the increase, the monthly increase between last year and this year for July and August now, I think they're staggering.
Yes. Yes, they are.
We'll talk more about this some other time, but I'm not sure that increasing the supply is the answer. More wells pumping more water doesn't necessarily equate to solving any of this issue.
I think one of the comments that did come up tonight is relevant here, and that is it's been a while since we've had sounds like it's been a while, way before my time, that there's been a comprehensive look at options. So I think my intuition is the same as yours, Mark, that finding a new site is a long stretch and difficult and certainly expensive. But I wonder if we need to at least have a discussion about that, to follow proper procedures. A number of people commented on that, and I think we got to provide a well thought out answer. So my thought is maybe on the future agenda, Chris, we could all update on what was the last review of this. Were there any recommendations? Just so even if it's correct that there's no options, I think we need to document that, because there were several comments along those lines tonight.
I want to say the last was done in '87, but I'm not positive. I have the report. Actually, Roger's read the report. That's why he mentioned it.
Right.
It has been over 20 years since we had anything done. Those reports said that we have all the wells that we need, I
Right.
believe. It was capacity that was our problem.
Yep.
But I'll get you those reports if you want to review them also.
I'll take a look at them. I'll take a look
Yep.
at them. We should have this discussion at a future
Sure.
meeting. Tom, did you have a
Sure.
comment or question?
Yeah, I'm a little confused on that point, only because we have a permit from the state that allows us to pump 640,000 gallons per day from
Right.
all wells combined.
Right.
Whether we have 5 wells or 6 wells, it's still 640,000 gallons per day,
Right.
right?
Yep.
That doesn't increase volume.
Right.
But Chris, you did say that the state may increase our volume because of our past efficiency. So it seems like that horse may be the first thing that we want to do.
Correct. And we're still in the midst of trying to get that permit done. We're still in the interim.
Yeah.
Actually, we were hoping to have it finished 5 years ago. We're still paying Tater and Howard to run through this. We've had a few project managers leave, been passed through to a couple different, through sickness, through better jobs, some people for marriage, but we've had a lot of people. But it is supposed to be increased. We're just in the middle of the mitigation for that now. They're trying to figure out, they have a combination of things. If they can show that the town of Barnstable in Katuitt has done so many drainage projects to deter the water from going into the ocean, then we get credits for that. The lands that we have bought since then, we can get credits for. There's different things out there. So we're really close. It's just a matter of, with COVID came to, they stopped pushing. They didn't want to, do anything. It's put dampened a lot of projects out there that are going on.
And I'll just add, I did review the status of those reports a while back, and I did speak with some people at Tater and Howard, as well as a call to the state. One of the remaining issues was, in fact, some of these drawdown issues on the Santuit River with respect to cold water fishery. There was some recommendations, and then we go back and look at that. Tater did respond to that by going through some questionnaire calculation. But that is one of the issue that we were talking about earlier tonight, I think, is one of the issues that DEP is at least thinking about in future expansions. I forget the numbers, Chris, in terms of how much they're going to give us, but it was not a lot, correct?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't a huge increase. It was, I want to say, I'll have to sit down and look at it. I don't want to misspeak here or anything like that. I just to go back on what Tom said too, I'm not an expert here, but I'm pretty sure that the state will not let us put in another well.
Yeah.
Because we don't need it for what they permitted us for, because we have the capabilities to pump with the wells that we have. I'm not sure if they'll permit another one, put it that way.
So I think it circles back to one of the comments that was made tonight, that I think Jack Thomas made it, that we perhaps need some further verification about this issue, about the interaction with the stream and the wetlands. And I think I have some thoughts on how we might get at that, which we could talk about maybe at the next meeting. Maybe we need some additional, there is a USGS model in the area that we've talked about that does suggest that this is an issue, but perhaps a more detailed look at that to confirm that is warranted before all these issues are tied together. The Water Management Act permit, the impacts on the stream, and what the state will grant. So we may need to do a little bit more detail and updating on the hydrology confirmation before we take next steps on that. So I guess my suggestion is we'll put that on the agenda for a future meeting. We're not going to resolve it tonight, but I agree. Another well is difficult and probably something we can't do within the context of our existing permit, anyways.
Hey, Scott.
Yep.
It's off topic, but is there a way to do a test well on either side of well number 4 to see the manganese and iron levels on either side? To see
Absolutely.
whether, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think we could talk to, maybe we need to think about a hiring hydrogeologist, or maybe Tata Howard can do this. I'm thinking of testing like that, but also maybe some additional modeling. There is the USGS West Cape model that was done in this area. A modeler could take that and do a more detailed assessment of our situation and look at, because one of the questions that I think Mr. Anderson had asked a while back, or somebody else, is, well, how much reduction do you want? And I don't think I have an idea of that. I do feel that we have a problem, but I can't answer the question as to how much we need to reduce it to avoid the problem. But that's something we could determine through both, as you're suggesting, some on-site tests as well as some modeling. Because you can run a number of scenarios and see where you get this induced infiltration. And so we probably should talk about that, whether that's something we want to undertake or not, to document the problem further. And also that would help us also identify how much of a reduction we want or feel we need, which I think would be helpful. So I'll give some thought to that, and we'll get that on the agenda for a future meeting, Jen, to talk about. And I'll give some thought to what sort of analyses could be done, like the one you're suggesting, Mark, might help us figure some of that out. We still have a couple of important items we need to resolve tonight, but before,
Yes.
I want to, any other questions for Chris on his report, superintendent's report? Okay, well, why don't we move on? I'll start on both of these. The first one is vehicle acquisition. As you know, we've had a discussion about this, and I think, as you may know, I was contacted by one of the fire commissioners who had made an offer, a potential offer, to utilize a used vehicle that was being replaced. I believe it's the fire chief's vehicle. And they did provide some information on the status of that vehicle, which I passed along to Chris and asked him to consider that and evaluate that as an option. Chris and I have talked about this a couple times, but I've asked Chris to kind of give us an update on his recommendation. And this is important. We need to make some sort of decision on this tonight, because it is coming up as a vote with the Prudential Committee to authorize this money. They have made one vote to keep that in place, but my understanding, Chris, that we need to get back to them before their next discussion of this and next decision. So,
Yeah, we have to make a decision tonight on a figure, I believe.
Yeah.
It's basically, it's not a decision on them. It's just if they're gonna, I believe actually they've already recommended whether, as it's read. So all we need really is a hard figure to talk about at the second, at the special district meeting, which I believe is being held on the 3rd at Lowell Park. Somebody should have gotten the mail today, their notice, everybody.
yeah, and by the way, I have a conflict with that date, so if one of the other commissioners could think about being available for that, that would be great. But Chris, why don't you, I think what I'd like you to do is provide an explanation or recommendation from you. I do think we need to seriously consider the use of this used vehicle, because it seems like a pretty cost-saving item, but I know that there are some drawbacks to that. So I'd like you to summarize that for the commissioners.
Correct. I did have a talk with Scott. He approached me about the chief's vehicle. Once they get the new one, handing it over to us and letting us use it, and the deputy chief or the chief would use their own vehicle over there until the following year, basically, when they decided to trade it in and try to get another vehicle. It would be a way just to try to save the district some money. I listened to the fire commissioners meeting the other night that they had, and a couple of the fire commissioners didn't really look like they wanted to get rid of it at that point, because they seemed that the selling point was to keep the vehicle so that they wouldn't have to put lights into one of the other guys' vehicles, or they had the equipment readily available all the time. This was a way for them to sell buying the new vehicle. So two of the commissioners didn't really seem to like it. So in turn, I called up the chairman of the board over there, and he told me that he said that he intends this to be an emergency situation if we don't get any money to buy a different vehicle. Because he was thinking that it could be an alternative if we got turned down at district meeting. I talked to the fire chief. He doesn't really care. He said, you know what? It's going to cost roughly, he said, $9,000 in mileage payback to either himself or to the deputy chief for the year, and possibly to switch lights and take the equipment out of that truck and put it into one of their personal vehicles, roughly another $500 to $1,000. So he says it's probably going to cost somebody $10,000, whether it's us or them. He doesn't really know. That would be a discussion for the fire commissioners. So somebody's going to end up in the next year spending that much money, it looks like, is the way he kind of sounded. So with that in mind, I don't want the fire department to have to pay anything to fix a problem in the water department, to tell you the truth. I don't know if you guys have any different opinions on that. If so, fine. That I do whatever you guys say, and it would take care of my problem if they gave it to me. So I don't know how to approach it except that we have two options here, really, that I saw with a new vehicle. One was spending, I think it was, we had a price of $16,375 with $3,000 coming back in incentives, which put it down to $13,375, which would be a 3-year lease for a vehicle to be here. And then we had a new vehicle, which roughly came in at $27,700 basically, and it would be 4-wheel drive. It could be a vehicle that I could still put tools inside for emergencies if I had to show up to do any kind of emergency turnoff if everybody was busy or if we had any problems, or meeting the guys in the middle of the winter, any of that stuff, or going down to fix a problem down the pumping stations. It's just more of an emergency in the middle of the night stuff kind of thing. That would be my preference, but like I said, any of the options will work for me. It almost seems like for another $3,000 or whatever it is, so $3,300 for 3 years, I don't, instead of the $10,000 I'm going to pay in one, you'd get 3 years out of it instead of one. And I know that we're talking about turning it back, but we don't know if in a year or when they get their new vehicle after that, is everything going to be back to normal? I hope so. That's for sure. So I guess I'm not being much help here, but I know it's more money and everything else. I think that we could always go to there and say, hey, do you want this or not? And if they say no, we could try the other option. Go ahead. Sorry, Tom.
Mr. Chairman, as I recall at the district meeting, when the fire department asked for money for a new vehicle, I think there was some controversy over that. Is there not? I don't really want to wade into those waters. We have money in a stabilization fund for emergency situations, and this is a situation that clearly falls within that realm. It also lends itself to an addition to the district's water department that will ensure that we always have at least 3 good vehicles, probably 4. And we have 4 field guys. So I would think that the best option is probably the most expensive, sorry to say, but we have the money in the stabilization fund. It's already there. And I would recommend that we move forward towards purchasing the truck option that you mentioned that gives us the 4-wheel drive capabilities, allows us to have the equipment on board for servicing pump houses any time of year as need be. And I just think that's a better option for us. I think it's more secure. I think it's safer.
I'll just comment, Tom. Thank you. I did not listen in on that meeting, so I'm not privy to what you heard. I only had a one-on-one conversation with the commissioner who called me. who suggested this was an option, but I was unaware of the controversy that you are bringing up tonight. And I think that's worth considering. Mark, do you have thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, as we discussed last time, I think we've gotten along fine with 3 vehicles until there was a COVID emergency. I think the COVID emergency will not last indefinitely. And I don't know why we can't go back to 3 vehicles that work perfectly well with the 2 junior operators working together, driving together, learning from each other. I think that's actually a good model instead of everybody having their own vehicle. I think it's up to the Prudential Committee. This isn't fire department money and water department money, it's the district money. And I think the Prudential Committee's recommendation is really what I would follow as to what they think is appropriate. If they think it's appropriate to save the district money by having the fire vehicle come over to the water department, and the fire department vehicle is appropriate for water department use, it sounds like it is. I haven't heard that it isn't. You may get more than 3 years out of it. So I don't think it's exactly an apples to apples thing with the 16,000 minus the $3,000 lease. I don't know what the condition of that vehicle is. If could it last more than 3 years? I don't know. So I don't have enough information, but it just seems to me that just because we have money doesn't mean we should spend it. I think that the district Prudential Committee, as the finance committee for the district, should figure out what's appropriate. I think we do need a 4th vehicle now.
Mm-hmm.
We might not need it a year from now. And if there's a cost-efficient way to provide that 4th vehicle for a temporary basis, I think we should do it.
Just for clarification, the Prudential Committee has not deliberated on that particular decision yet, correct? In terms of this weighing in on which of the options might be best for the overall district. They've simply agreed to set aside or approve us using this fund if we want to do that. Is that correct? The status of their deliberations? And I guess my other question is, do we have, if we wanted to put it, are you suggesting, Mark, that we kind of put this decision back to them to make a decision between?
No, I think we ought to communicate our intention is to provide a 4th vehicle for the water department, at least for the next 12 months. And the Cadillac version of that is to go out and buy a new vehicle for $30,000. That's why we have a warrant article. For that. But if it can be done more cheaply, that we can get a vehicle that meets our needs for the next year, I think that they should have a recommendation for that. It's the district's monies, not the water department's monies.
Okay. Tom, do you have a question on that?
I don't know that the Prudential Committee's gonna want to take up that. I mean, in the past, my experience is that the various departments within the district decide what they need for equipment. Correct me if I'm wrong, Chris.
Well, we're going to tell them we need a 4th vehicle for at least a year.
I mean, I think the unique situation here is that the fire department, the fire commissioners did contact me and us, which kind of puts this. I agree with you, Tom. In the past, or I would guess in the past, that that's correct. Everybody's made their own decisions, but now we have a situation where the fire commissioners have reached out, at least one of them, and suggested this might be an option. And I agree with your earlier comment. If you observe some controversy among the other fire commissioners, that does put us in kind of a awkward position. I kind of like Mark's thought here that maybe the Prudential Committee does need to step in here because it does involve the 2 departments, and there's an offer on the table, or at least presumably. But I agree with your comment. We don't want to wade into a difficult situation either.
Right, or pick up a vehicle that we're going to have to then repair and maintain for a vehicle that's been driven as the chief's vehicle. So those are not easy road miles by any means.
I mean, I've talked to Chris about this a couple times, and frankly, I'm not very clear on what I think is the best option here. There's a lot of this. I think all of the comments you guys have made tonight are highly relevant, and I guess I want to ask you, Chris, again, given what you've heard tonight, what are your thoughts? I mean, I guess one question I have is, Mark did suggest, after a year, whenever it takes to get through this virus situation, would you agree that it would make sense and would be just fine to go back to the 3 vehicles, and perhaps there's some even advantages of some of the staff working together there? I mean, do you agree with that?
Yes, I have no problem doing that at all. Whether it's if we do they're going to want this vehicle back within a year anyways, because they're going to use it as a trade-in on another purchase for the deputy chief. So it could only last for a year. They just put $700. They had to do some transmission work to it. They had to do some drivetrain work to it also. The chief said it has, I think he said, he has high mileage on it. He said that's why he's getting rid of it. It's because of all the money he's been pouring into it. Maybe it's a brand new vehicle inside now because it's had so much work to it. I don't know. I have no problem. And I have said, because I was under the understanding when we talked about this, that even if we got a vehicle, it would be gone in 3 years if it was a 3-year lease. If it was an outright sale, that when it was time to either trade in another vehicle or anything like that, or once this was over, that when we thought we could still get the best money for it, we either put it out to bid or we would try to trade 2 of them in on one to try to get money back. I always had planned that we were going to be going back. I was under the impression from the last conversation that we had, and a couple, I believe you were also, because I think I remember you saying that at one of the, when we talked to the Prudential Committee, that we planned on going back to 3. This would be some kind of temporary situation until the life of that vehicle was not needed. Like the vehicle was over or lease, or when it wasn't needed.
Well, I mean, it strikes me we do have the approval to purchase, as Tom mentioned, but we also have at least a potential offer on the table for a more temporary and cost savings option.
Scott?
Tom? Yep, Mark?
It's Mark. I think if we go to a special district meeting and ask for $30,000 to buy a vehicle, and the voters understand that there's a free vehicle that can be transferred from one department to another, politically, I don't think that makes us look very good.
Yeah, where I was leading is, it strikes me that perhaps we should need to exhaust this, look into and exhaust this other option first. If there's some controversy among the fire commissioners, that needs to get resolved. I mean, is there an offer or is there not an offer? And if it's valid, then I think I would tend to agree with you, Mark, that we need to seriously consider that as a cost saving. It certainly sounds a lot better as we're talking about a temporary situation here.
The other thing is that I'm expecting, and I hope, that Chris gets his vehicle back, and the 4th vehicle goes to one of the junior operators. I mean, unless obviously it's up to Chris which vehicle he wants, but he took one for the team. He gave up his truck so that his crew could be safe, and I think that's to be commended.
Right. So what would be the course of action if we wanted to further explore and exhaust this option of getting the fire chief's vehicle? What would be the next step or two we need to take?
Well, we need to get verification from the fire commissioners that that's an option. I have not got verification from that. When I talked to the chairman over there, he said to me that it was an option, an emergency option, if we did not get a vehicle. That's how he felt it. He presented it. And I said, it didn't sound like it was presented that way. He says, well, that's how I meant to present it.
So would we need a vote of the fire commissioners then to resolve that, to clarify that?
I believe that we do, and we're running really short on time.
Yes.
Because of September 3rd.
So,
Tom?
Scott, I think then what's been said from the fire commission, and I'm not speaking for them by any means, but they're saying that if we don't get the money at the special district meeting, that they will then consider loaning us this vehicle for a year. And we pick up the cost to maintain it and keep it fueled, et cetera. Is that correct?
That's what the chairman put up.
This
had
is
said to
a
me.
self-fulfilling prophecy. So the voters are going to say, we vote down the money, you guys can get it from the fire department. That's a self-fulfilling prophecy. I mean, this is public information that this is out there. I think Scott, as chair, you ought to be talking to the chair directly and not ask Chris to do it.
Okay.
I
Like
also
it's-
think what needs to be added to that discussion is that if we do get that vehicle from the fire department, they are looking to us, the water department, to pick up the cost of mileage reimbursement for the vehicle that the deputy chief would need to use, because they were expecting to have the use of this chief's vehicle along with the new vehicle that they were purchasing. They're now going to be short a vehicle, and that cost will need to be absorbed. So it's not a net zero transaction, like it's no additional expense to the district. There will be an expense, whether it's reimbursing the deputy chief for use of his personal vehicle, or for the water department acquiring a vehicle for use from the water department on a temporary basis.
Well, I'm more than happy.
But we're still saving money because we're not stuck with a 3-year lease. I don't know. That's a good point, Jen.
And Chris, again, $13,000 is a number you were looking at for the 3-year lease.
Yeah, he had a price of $13,375 after the $3,000 incentives. He still would have to go to get 2 other prices because he needs at least 3 prices on a state bid. And he said, so that would be the most expensive. It could go down less.
So we're talking about 13 versus the 9 or 10 for the reimbursement on the mileage and the upgrade of the lights and so forth.
Correct.
Is that a GSA vehicle, Chris? What is that?
I'm not sure what you mean by GSA. It's a state
Government service agency. That's
no, it goes through CVEC, which that has to do with the it has to do because it's a hybrid. So they're saying there's electric options there with it where you could save gas mileage. You can get I think you get 72 hours of electric time with it, and then the rest is fuel, and it gets like I think 30 miles to the gallon or something like that. So they get that incentive. If they can get that in and roll it into municipalities, they might get a kickback from something also.
okay.
CVEC is the people that we get our electric credits from also, who got us going through to get our electric credits back.
So is it possible that we could go to the meeting and reduce the amount requested to $13,000?
Yeah, because we only have an upset limit. We asked for authorization up to, what was it, 35,000, Chris?
Correct. I think it was. Yeah, and we were talking about listen, we understand that we'd like to amend it to this says 16,375 to say 7,000. If you said 17, I'd have to get a vinyl sign for the side of it. It might be a couple things that have to be done afterwards, just to put a couple pieces of equipment in it or something like that.
Jen?
I have 2 more things to add,
Yes.
not to throw another monkey wrench in, but the other thing that they discussed at the fire commissioners meeting was somewhere in between this option of a 3-year lease and buying a brand new vehicle. Chief Rude was able to secure some, like the boat that they got for the fire department through some government source that was selling used equipment. So maybe there's an option to purchase a used vehicle rather than a new, although then that means we're taking on some potential repair expenses if it were a used vehicle. Second to that, I do see that Carol Zayas has her hand raised if you would like to entertain public comment.
Yes, please, Carol.
Okay.
Carol, do you have a
Carol.
question or comment?
Hi, how are you guys? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Long meeting. Thanks for sticking out through. Just thinking about next week's meeting. I have no further input on what you're doing, but I would just very clearly explain when you're going up for this decision, why Chris isn't buying his own vehicle and just charging the district the mileage. That's one thing. Just be very clear about that. And two, if you do go for the 3-year lease and it ends up only being a year, maybe at that point, someone in the village or the water district, or even Chris himself, could buy in or take over the payments on the lease. I don't know if that's allowed in the village and stuff like that, but just some other creative ways to strengthen your case that after a year, if COVID goes away and we can go back to 3 cars, this is what our plans would be. Just additional information for next week's meeting.
Thank you. All right.
Okay.
Go ahead, Chris.
Just a quick thing, that it's a municipal plan. You wouldn't be able to buy it out because you're getting state incentives to keep it and everything. It's going through a municipal party to do it. So I don't think it can be sold to a personal person or a public person at that point. On one thing on Jen's response there about the military stuff that he had gotten before, Paul looked into that for me, and the only thing he could find was someplace down, I want to say in Georgia, that I might have been able to get an 8-person bench van if I wanted to go down and drive it up. So, or something like that, or 10-person big bench van. So that was the only thing he found on the giveaway at that point.
Just wanted to make sure we covered that base because it was brought up in the public meeting. Yep.
Well, I think we need to make some kind of decision here tonight. I'm happy to talk with the fire commissioner if that's the pleasure of the other commissioners, if we take a vote on that, if we want to go down that road. It does strike me that if it is a $13,000 lease versus a $10,000 cost to the district, that seems like a pretty reasonable and easier way to go, if in fact the other commissioners agree with that. But I guess I'll entertain a motion as to how we go forward. I think we need to dispense with this item one way or another.
I don't, Scott, I'm sorry, I don't understand. Are you saying that the lease would be a reasonable way to go, or that the $10,000?
Okay, I'm sorry. Let me clarify. What I'm saying is, I think if Chris's point here, that if we do have that $10,000 cost on the used vehicle, and as you suggested, there might be some somewhat complicated issues among the fire commissioners that aren't clear at this point. It strikes me a simpler and not too much more costly option would be the $13,000. So I guess I'm kind of leaning towards that as a middle ground here. But again, I'd like to hear from you guys on that. Chris, did you have another comment on that?
I just wanted to reiterate, we would have to ask for more than 13 because the 13,000 would be given back afterwards. So that would go into the general fund.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Correct.
Yeah.
17.
But the net cost would be roughly the 13, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
So if the water department was going to be billed for the fire chiefs or deputies' mileage at a cost of approximately $9,000 or $10,000 a year, then I think that's the way to sell the $17,000 lease. That you get 3 more years out of it instead of 1, and the fire department won't have to spend that $10,000 on their own then if they don't have to involve with us. Is that the idea?
Well, they'll keep the vehicle, right?
Yeah, right. So, so I think that's probably the way to go. And I applaud Chris for finding that CVAC option. Are you sure is it a sure deal, Chris?
Yes. I have an email. It's actually a month old, but Evan, who I talked to over there, Emilio Malillo or something, he said that he already got one. This is how he got this price here. And he said, which would be the lowest. He said, I have to get 2 more prices. He says they could be high, they could be low. It could go down, it could go up. But this would be at least the way to start.
So I think that's the way that Tom should sell it to the voters next week.
Assuming that I'm there. I would make a motion that we pursue a $17,000 lease option on a CVEC vehicle for the water department to use for the next 3 years. And that said money come from the water department's stabilization fund.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Great, thank you. That was a tricky one, and I think we ended up in a pretty good place there. Chris, I also want to thank you. I know you put an enormous amount of time in here, and we've been around this a couple times, but I think we did the right thing. I think we're considering, seriously considering
I believe
costs.
that, right, I think 3 and we're done.
So
3
very
and
good.
done, hopefully, yeah.
All right, let's move on to this last item. This involves the elementary school. You recall that we've had discussions about this. We sent a letter. Mark, you drafted a letter as former chair to the town on this, and I had a call on this as well from the fire commissioners, and they wanted to just put a question to us if we should consider any type of joint occupancy of this building as an option. And I don't think they're considering moving the entire fire department over there, but they are, as I think everybody knows, they are looking at doing some office space improvements, and he felt that this might be an easier option for them, and wanted to know if we had any interest in talking about some joint use of that space. I did approach Chris on this a little bit, and I'd like to give him the opportunity to give his opinion on this, but it's something I'd like to discuss tonight and get back to them whether or not we have an interest in pursuing this or not. But maybe I'll ask you, Chris, first to give your thoughts on this, because you and I talked about this.
Yeah, we have a ton of things. We have our whole entire line system dedicated where we are, our line batching facility, which was very expensive to put in. It's a pretty good location for working in and out of. 28 is not always the greatest to get in and out of. Do I want to move? Never. I love it where I am. I believe every one of us would say that's there. Does the district have a problem? Yes. They need some kind of office space. They need something like that. And I think there were some options there earlier about separating that land. And if that land came up, something happened. I think that we could have some sort of, I think the district could be helped out tremendously. We do have a tank that's adjacent to that. So yeah, if we ever had to build anything that had to go with that tank a little more, any kind of treatment system or anything like that, it'd be nice to have the land around there. Our well field's very close there for Station 3, and I'd love to have that stay safe and not have too much nitrogen going in there. I mean, if they sold up the houses, you talk about the sprinkler systems then. That's a big hunk of land. So it's not going to help us right now with the present water department we have. It's not going to help anything in the short run to us or help us work any better right now. But I think as far as the district goes, it's a great district move.
Okay, other thoughts, Tom, Mark?
Well, I think as a meeting space, it's certainly fully ADA compliant for accessibility. Would have to be as a school. So as a meeting space, I think it's great. Of course, we do have Freedom Hall, but you could certainly have bigger meetings at the school. But I defer to Chris and his evaluation of the office space. I've always thought it was a little kind of an odd, almost like you're going down in the basement to go to your office there, Chris. But if you like it, that's your discretion. The mole people living in the basement down there. Jen's the only one who sees the light of day, I think. If they like it, that's their thing, you know. I just one other thing. I did talk to the town councilor, Chris Clark from West Barnstable today. She called me, wanted to know if we had anything to say. There was a property asset management committee meeting today, the same time as we were meeting. So I told her none of us could come, but she also said that committee did not have a copy of our letter.
really?
So maybe Jen could forward that to, I think the woman's name is Cindy in that department, Jen.
I'll find it.
I can find out who you are. But anyway, because we had sent that to the Councilor Grizzetti, I think.
Right,
So
right.
maybe
Yep,
it didn't
that's right.
filter down to that committee. But in any case, I haven't really been kept up to speed of what the town is actually thinking about. Does anybody know?
Well, I did listen in on a meeting where I forget the gentleman's name, David, somebody who does the property.
David Anthony.
Thank you. David Anthony gave a
He's
presentation.
the property manager for the town. He's like an assistant to the town manager.
Yeah, I listened in on a meeting where he presented some architect's reports on costs of renovation and some various options, which actually were quite expensive, as I recall. I forget the numbers, but more expensive than any of us would guess, I think. And I did offer testimony at that meeting that, you know, we have an interest in the property, in that we don't want anything to go in there that would raise any issues with water quality, whatever that might be. And I think some of the things they were thinking about, namely a housing project, et cetera, would in fact raise those threats. So I think that they're, you know, of all the options they're thinking about, some of them are things that we probably don't want to see happen, which essentially was the effect of the letter that we submitted. But that was pretty much the short and the long of it. And then when I had this call from the fire commissioners, I thought it was something worth discussing. But again, when I talked to Chris, I don't see a real need for us. I agree with you, Mark. There's probably some advantages to the district, but maybe not so much for us. And if that's the end all, I can get back to them with that as our assessment of the situation.
I would go a little further than that, Scott, and we
Okay.
did, in fact, submit formal testimony to the Asset Management Committee.
Yep.
And within that document, we stated that we wanted to be proactive with the management of that property, in such that should we ever need a treatment plant, and should we continue to want to protect our zone of contribution for well 3, that we wanted to be involved with the management of that property.
Okay.
Can I just interrupt? I got an email from Chris Clark, the town councilor from West Barnstable. This was at 7:50 tonight. She said that the asset management advisory meeting, Scott Horsley was not mentioned in the minutes of whatever past meeting he attended. Apparently the water commissioner's letter is also not in the record. She made mention of it at this meeting tonight. She suggested that we send the letter and that one of the water commissioners speak again at the next advisory meeting of this asset management committee. We voted today, the committee, she's on this asset management committee. We voted today to recommend to the town council that the town move forward on looking into demolish both the Katuitt and Marston's Mills schools. We know for it to get funded, this will be a long process, so it's not a rush, but moving it forward. And the demolition funding would come first, and the discussion on future uses would come later, given that many possible changes might be afoot. So anyway, that's the news from the Asset Management Advisory Committee to the Town Council.
So I just looked in my email and I have the letter dated June 8th and also the portal, Tom, that you sent me to upload the comments. So it was sent hard copy as well as submitted for comment prior to their meeting on June 8th. So I have a copy of it and I will resend it.
When is the next asset committee meeting? Does it say? I'm sorry? No,
I
it
don't
doesn't say.
know.
Okay, all right. Well, I can, go ahead.
I would just say that, Scott, that, yeah, we're interested in it as part of the district.
Right,
We're interested in it as water managers. And it
Yes.
abuts, like we've said before, it abuts a water tower. And we just received a report a year ago that said, hey, you're gonna need to spend $10 million on a treatment plant. Well, if we need to do that, we're gonna need to put it somewhere.
right.
Right.
Okay, well, I will find out when the next, let's make sure they get the letter, Jen. I'll follow up with you on that tomorrow. That's kind of surprising. It's also surprising that my testimony was not included in the minutes. I'm absolutely sure that I did testify. I remember it very well. Chris, did you listen in on that meeting? I'm trying to remember.
I don't believe it was that one. I believe it was
Okay.
the first one when they had put the different situations where they wanted to keep. There was a lot of local comment on it.
Okay, well, I'll make sure that.
You know what we could do, Scott, is to invite David Anthony to our next meeting of the Water Commission.
Okay, that's a good idea.
Scott,
Yeah.
it's Carol Zeiss. I remember you saying that, and the meetings
you.
their meetings are recorded, so you could go back and find it exactly. So that's what's confusing.
Okay, good point. Yep. You think that's a good idea, inviting David Anthony to the next meeting?
Well, along with Jessica as a courtesy, but I think he's the guy that is going to be coordinating whatever decision process is made.
Okay. Well, I think we definitely need to step it up here because they don't even have a copy of record of our letter. That's kind of frustrating. And I agree with you, Tom. We certainly want to maintain an interest, even if it's not sharing office space there, which I think was the original thought that I had been approached with. There's a number of options we want to weigh in on, regardless of what they do there. So why don't I do that? I'll contact David Anthony and Jessica and see if we can get them at the next meeting so we can have a direct discussion with them about this. And Jen, I'll contact you tomorrow to make sure we get the letter there, and maybe we can check on the minutes too. I don't know if the minutes have been approved, but we'll maybe get them amended to make sure that they have my comments in on that as well.
I can get you David's contact info.
Okay, thank you. All right, any other thoughts on this agenda item? Okay, yep.
Just one more thing. So the fire commission approached you on that from the Prudential Committee, because they, last year they did their space needs assessment. And they spent $25,000 deciding that they needed more space, but then they moved away because the demolition of the building and construction was too costly. So
Right.
I would think they could potentially, share some of that space as well, particularly for storage of records and the clerk's office space.
Yep.
For which year he is
Good point.
District.
Good point. Thank you.
Maybe it's not an all or nothing thing. I mean, maybe the fire district could share space in the building with some other socially beneficial use.
Right.
They've been having a hard time finding the right occupants for this building. But it is definitely in a critical location for us, no doubt about that. So we want to maintain that interest. So, okay, well, I will move ahead with what we talked about, getting in touch with David and Jessica and make sure that we get this letter properly distributed to the whole council. And maybe I'll talk with Chris Clark too. I don't know if I got copied on that email you saw, Mark, but I'll.
She wants yours, so I'll send it.
Okay, thank you.
I'll put you together with it.
Thank you. Okay. Any other? I think that completes our agenda. Any other items that we need to talk about tonight?
Just to set the next meeting, I believe.
Okay.
Like you read my mind.
So what are our options here, Jen? What do you?
So do you want to continue on the third Wednesday of the month or fourth Wednesday?
Both are good for me looking at September. 16th and 23rd both look good. How about you, gentlemen?
It's fine.
Are you okay?
Hey, Jen,
Yes.
are you going to be here then?
I will not be here on the 16th, but I will on the 23rd.
Okay.
Maybe
But you
that's a
don't
good.
need me to conduct a Zoom meeting.
But you're so much better at it than the rest of us.
You'll just miss me if I'm not here.
Oh,
Well, I always think it's helpful to have Jen involved. So if unless people have a reason to do it on the 16th, I would suggest we do the 23rd.
23rd.
You guys
That's
okay
fine.
with that? All right, let's do the 23rd. And Jen, I'll work with you on an agenda.
5 p.m. or 5:30?
Mark, you had some
Well,
questions on this before.
5:30 would be best for me.
Okay, 5:30.
Works.
That's okay with you, Tom?
Absolutely.
Very good. All right, 5:30 p.m. on the 23rd. Jen, I will be in touch with you tomorrow morning.
Sounds good.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all.
Jen, you can't say aye.
The Bruins are on. I gotta go.
All
Bye,
right,
friends.
guys, thank you
Good night,
very much.
everybody.
Good night.
Bye-bye.